Perfect. So, guys, welcome to the Safe Wellbeing Podcast with me, Katie. And today I am delighted to be joined by Oliver Towner from Arthur C. Towner Limited. Am I saying that right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So, straight off, Oliver, I'm going to hand over to you and give us about 60 seconds if you could summarise you, your role within the industry, and yeah, over to you. Go for it.
Wow, thank you very much for having me. So a bit about me, as you said, my name's Oliver Towner. I'm sixth generation in my family to own and run Arthur C. Towner Limited. Next year is actually our 150th anniversary, which is pretty crazy, really. Yeah. So my role at the company, I'm managing director. After Dad enthusiastically retired about 5 years ago, sort of said, "Here you go, good luck," and loved it ever since. We'll probably talk about it a bit at some point, but my route to where I am now isn't necessarily the standard one that I think most people would expect, which I think has given me a good kind of overall look at things and how to look at problems we face, maybe slightly differently from some people, which is always helpful. But my role, basically, most of my time these days is spent running the company rather than being a funeral director. I stopped doing funerals just after COVID, and pretty much now, if I was to go back to doing them, I don't know if I would even have any time to do one, let alone any a week. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell, pretty much.
Okay, so coming on to that, obviously, like, I've been privy to your not so standard way into the industry that you did share with me before. So I'm going to start off with that. Your background was acting. You shared that with me. You were an actor. So from being an actor to then obviously still having the industry within the family, you know, how do you go from being Oliver the actor to Oliver the funeral director and then managing director?
Oh, you never really stop. You never really stop. There's a touch of the theatrics about this industry, I think. But for me, it started a lot longer than like before that. So when I was growing up, Dad always said to my sister and I, go and do other things first. Don't just come straight into this. Like, if there's anything that you want to try and do, go and do it, because you might find something that you absolutely love. And if you kind of need to come back to the business at some point, you always can, and it'll always be here. So I grew up going through school wanting to go into the army and be a medic, which was always one thing I really wanted to do. I was fortunate enough to start looking into being an army scholar and had some great conversations around that. And pretty much just before getting onto it, I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So they turned around and they were like, "No, sorry, can't have you anymore." And that was at 16. So it means that I spent my GCSEs and A levels basically going, I don't know what I'm going to do. Was quite good at drama while at school, and kind of thought, you know what, I don't need to do UCAS or anything that everyone's getting really stressed about if I apply for drama school. So I'll do that. Apply for drama school, somehow managed to get in first year applying, which was still crazy. So lived in London, finished my training in London, which is a 3-year BA. Lived in London as an actor for about 4 years after graduating, so I was up there for about 7 years in total. Managed a gym up there as well in my part-time. And then by the time I got to about 27, 28, the concept of actually having a career and earning a dependable salary rather than acting work was quite appealing. And so started to come back down a couple of days a week, and pretty much just fell in love with it, fell in love with the team that were here. Saw a real opportunity of some positives that I could bring to the company, and sort of drive it into what is now the next generation. So that's sort of how I found my way from it to where I am now.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that I think my background in acting, my degree, has given me is being able to understand people. Being able to sort of, because you spend so much time at drama school sort of studying characters, but it's more than that. It's studying people and how people work and why people want certain things and things like that. And being able to kind of sit down and talk to one of the team here or anywhere and kind of try and get what they're about quite quickly. And sometimes when they don't see the problem themselves, and you can kind of not explain it to them, but you talk it through them, maybe you ask the right questions, and all of a sudden, before you know it, they're firing on all cylinders again, which is fantastic.
Do you think that's allowed you obviously to have that different background, to come into it differently and really look after your own? You've got a lot of staff to look after, and obviously the pressures of being that next generation as well. You've already, or feels like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. So do you feel like at times you've had to use your acting to kind of hide how sometimes you feel, or can you use that to your advantage? How do you say that's played a part in where you've ended up today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I would be lying if I were to say that I've always been completely open and transparent with how I'm feeling about things in certain situations. Now, that might be something like in a frustrating situation around an employee to do with HR stuff. Maybe there's a really frustrating situation you're going through, and actually you can't vent that wildly unprofessional, and you have to stay calm and collected for the benefit of the situation, for the company, and also for the individual that's going through that. Or it could be something that a lot of us are going to have gone through, which was during COVID. The one thing so my dad retired basically it must have been about a month or two before the first lockdown. So I took over the company in the midst of all the Brexit planning. I mean, who remembers doing all that? That kind of went out the window straight away. Exactly. And then, I mean, because I was diabetic, I ended up spending the first 3 or 4 months in shielding, which meant that the management team I had at the time, we were on sort of Zoom calls and whatnot every day, trying to figure out what was going on. We had plans in place about having like 2 different rotas of staff, like an A team and a B team, and then them rotating to make sure that if someone got COVID and spread it through one of the teams, that the business wouldn't shut down completely.
Yeah.
I mean, the pressure we've got, we do between 40 and 50% of all the funerals in our area in a month, which is crazy because we've obviously working with families, which is fantastic that they've sort of willing to work with us for so long. But it's quite a lot of pressure there in providing a service to people, knowing that just in terms of logistics and infrastructure, like if we weren't able to cope for a week or two, the system wouldn't work, and that's a lot of pressure. So I think having that acting background to be able to just kind of think, right, what do I want to get across right now? What parts of how I'm feeling do I want to show, and what do I not? It can be really, really helpful. Yeah.
Do you think that shows your staff that work under you and the infrastructure you talk about, helps them feel a sense of they can be open with how they're feeling? Obviously, to a point, there's always a line that is very difficult to cross. But do you feel that there's an openness that if they feel they want to share, they can?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had a rough time personally with my mental health, sort of growing up in this industry, around this industry, out of this industry, doing other stuff. And I've been quite open about that with the team here previously, and am still now. And I know that in itself has paid dividends, because I know that I've had a lot of staff come up and talk to me when they've been struggling. There aren't many companies that you can work at where if you're having a bad time about something out of work, you can go and talk to your boss. He'll give you the time of day, listen to it, and actually help you find a solution to the problem. And that's one of the things that I don't want to say pride myself on, because I think it sounds arrogant, but one of the things that I try very hard to do is to make sure that if someone comes to me with a problem, no matter how big or small it is to me, it's a big problem for them. And I need to respect that and be grateful for the fact that they've come to talk to me about it and work with them to find a way through it. Because by doing that, and by working with the staff that you've got, from a business point of view, you want to get the best out of your team, because it will provide the best work for the customer and allow you to do, the most funerals that you can at a time. And on the other side, I just think from a moral point of view, it's just the right thing to do. I mean, my family's always, the business has always been very special to my family. And there's always that red flag of hearing the phrase like, oh, you're all family to me. But for me, we've got members of staff here that watched me running around this building like in a nappy when I was a baby. And for those people that are still here, it is a really weird feeling when you're then managing that, to have these people who effectively have given their lives to the company that, you know, I owe a lot, my family owes a lot to them. So the least we can do if they're having a rough time is to hear them out and help them.
Yeah, I think that's special, and I loved how you said, you know, I can relate to personally being someone who's been around the industry all of their life and doing things outside it, you know, bringing them together and trying to, you know, you fall in love with it in a different way. And I think that falls on to what I really wanted to ask you. You know, I was doing a little bit of digging in your website because I think that shows who we are as an industry and as individuals within the industry. And some of the challenges that you have faced, you know, personally out with, have you then found it easier to put on your funeral director's hat, your managing director's hat? Is that a comfort blanket, being able to shield away from how you've then looked after yourself and your own, you know, and how do you look after yourself or your colleagues and staff through all of that while still prioritising you?
That's a really good question. I'll try and answer it as best I can in a sort of a logical chronological sense. So my kind of mantra when it comes, my dad's mantra that has been passed on to me is very much, you can't save someone from drowning in a sinking ship. So it doesn't matter. It can come across as being slightly like selfish, depending on how you read it.
Yeah.
That's not how I see it. I see it as very much like, I need to make sure I'm taking care of myself because my team here needs me to be able to support them.
Yeah.
You know, my role as managing director isn't necessarily to be telling people, go here, do this, do that, do this better, do this faster. My role is to make sure I'm getting the best out of everyone. And I have personally felt when I've worked under people before that the best managers and leaders I've worked with have been the people that have taken the time to get to know me, to know how I work and how I need to be supported. You know, am I based on confidence? Am I based on accuracy? Am I based on having a good time? You know, however I function or however an individual functions, I think it's so important to just spend the time to get to know them as a person, because otherwise they're just like a name on a list for you, which I personally just see that as bad business. I don't think that's how it should be done.
Yeah, I think that's special because then you feel like you're counted for instead of, as they say, like just being a number. Yeah. And do you feel that the more that you look after yourself, that enables you to be that person to lead the support for the people that you are then getting to know?
Yeah, I mean,
to know the person.
Absolutely. So I, as I said, I've had struggles with my own mental health for a while. Previously, I'm in a really good place at the moment, which is fantastic.
Amazing.
And that's in part due to the fact that I'm able to go and speak to someone on a regular basis about my mental health, which I think I've done it for years now. I did it when I was in London, and I personally think everyone, if they have the opportunity to, should, because
I second that.
Just is fantastic. And you know, I'm starting to get on a bit. Age is starting to catch up with me. Diabetic, I sort of a little while ago was going, I'm just going to become a person who sits in an office, and I don't want to do that. So myself, my operations manager, and one of our funeral directors challenged ourselves and signed up, and we're doing a Spartan race in October, which I'm really excited for. I've done a couple before, so's the funeral director, but my ops manager hadn't, bless him. And we started a new gym routine, which is 6 days a week for an hour at like 6 a.m. Now, if you'd have told me 6 months ago this is what I'd be doing alongside doing my job, no way. But just looking after myself and doing that and pushing myself has given me the energy to actually do my job and focus on my job, if that makes sense. It's that thing of like, when you stop moving and doing things, you become lethargic, and the idea of doing things is terrible. But once you start doing them, you actually find that you have so much energy in the rest of your life to do everything else you need to, that I think it's just a top life tip. Personally, I think it's a secret that nobody uses enough.
You know, if I put my personal training coach hat on, you're an absolute dream, and it's why we're doing safe wellbeing. You are,
Yeah.
and I think that's really important to get that point across and really highlight it. Like, I've written in here, do you feel as an industry we're able to take time and look after our own? You've answered that question, you know, the way that we've spoken about that, and you're sharing that with your operations manager and one of your funeral directors, and that hour that you spend, I mean, I always say if you start with 5 minutes and you can build on that, but you're dedicating an hour of your time to be who you need to be as managing director, who you need to be as the sixth generation, and who you need to be for your staff. And that shows, I wish more of us could do that. And I think no matter the challenges that we face, I think it's definitely better. But yeah, I'm obviously going to be all for that, because putting on my 3 hats that I carry, that's the aim. And that's, anyone listening to this, I really hope they can take something from that. You know, we're just ordinary individual people. A, we love the job that we do, and B, we just want to help people. But in order to do that, we just have to help ourselves. And for me, coming on to that, would you say then that because you've got this routine, because the way you're doing, giving you more energy, it's not making you feel lethargic, you know, as managing director currently, keeping it in the present tense, are you able to switch off from work?
Yeah, I think so. I'm sure my wife might disagree with me slightly.
Yeah, okay.
I think I've always had the feeling with this business, and I think this industry, and it's something that I say to the team here a lot, which is, whenever you hear the phrase, "Oh, I'll find time to do it," I'll find, no, you won't. You need to make time to do things. This industry is one that can absorb you in its entirety if you let it. The amount of time that we can spend on funerals, the 2 a.m. anxiety dreams, the constant need to make sure everything is done, everything is prepared. And that's a terrifying thing. And if you let it swallow you up, it will. And there's no, you know, that's a kind of a really scary place to go to, and to try and come back from can be really hard. But making that promise to yourself in the first instance, and making time for yourself, even if it's half an hour, like, I'm blessed with where we are, where the office is located in St Leonard's on Sea. I mean, if I walked out the office in 25 seconds, I'd be standing on the seafront, and that is really special. And I know how lucky we are to do that. But just getting out the office, finding time, making time to get out of the office for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes of a day. The thing here is people not taking a lunch break. And I have to walk down to the office and be like, when are you taking lunch today? When are you taking lunch today?
Yeah.
Because we have to make time for ourselves, because if you're just flogging everything and working really hard all the time, you're not at your best.
That's a big challenge that I have seen. And I put it back to someone in a situation where they were carrying a hat of an area manager as well as doing on call. And the question of, you know, taking time for yourself, and they put it to me like you're describing, you know, they're not taking that time, but they could have made the time. And when we've pointed that out and just went through, explored of how they could have taken time, starting with 5 minutes, it was amazing the difference that person felt, as if shoulders were relaxed. The thing is, at the end of the day, because we represent our families, if we don't take that little bit of time, that family that's maybe coming in to do arrangements or coming in for a viewing or the funeral that we've got to go into, we're not going to be at our best. And, you know, that's where it has to be. So this is going to come on to a good point, like on your website and things that I've read about you and heard about you, like compassion, support, proactive, and professionalism was the 4 words that I've kind of picked out, and especially as we've been talking through as well. So what I wanted to really ask you is, do you feel that in our roles as an industry, and whatever role it is, that it has an impact mentally on those 4 aspects and what we do every day?
Yeah, look, I think the first one, compassion, is the biggest one.
Yeah.
So my wife's a paramedic, which is great, because, you know, we can support each other enough to sort of know what each other are going through, but not so directly that we're, you know, on each other's toes all the time about it. But there was a phrase that I heard the other day that I think someone at her work had thrown around, which was, I think it was compassion fatigue or something like that.
That's a big one. Compassion fatigue.
It's a thing at the moment, especially for people in the emergency services, you know, police, paramedics. who are constantly tried and tested. And I think in a way we can be as well. I think the one thing that scared me about COVID, which I think still lingers around in our industry to some extent, was we have a very proud tradition and history in this industry of caring for people, and care being the key word.
Mm-hmm.
During COVID, because of the sheer size of the mountain we all had to climb, I'm sure I wouldn't be the first person, to put my hand up and say that care probably wasn't forefront at that point.
I would totally agree.
There wasn't enough time in the day to sleep, let alone to do everything how we want to do it properly. I mean, I could sit for hours and talk to you about why that happened, but that's not the point. That's not why we're here. But I think when families come in to talk to us, they don't want a best friend. They don't want. I've never personally felt they don't want a shoulder to cry on necessarily, because there's a whole thing of going through grief of having your support network. And normally, if you're the person arranging a funeral, you've lost a major chunk of that support network one way or another.
Yeah.
And I've personally always felt, in terms of the family's well-being, it's actually irresponsible of a funeral director to put themselves as part of that support network. Because once that funeral's done, that person has to go on and carry on with their life. Now, if you've put yourself in that support network and they walk out the door, they're then potentially, unless you're making the commitment to remain friends with every person every family you ever look after, they're then going to have to start grieving and doing that support network again. So what families need from us is to be reliable, professional, honest, and caring.
Yeah.
And I think the compassion is the key thing there. And I think if you're not looking after yourself, then it can be so easy to lose sight of compassion and caring about others.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Like, I think with compassion fatigue, it's a lot of the challenges faces the detraction.
Yeah.
And a number of funeral directors that I've certainly spoke to, or even the likes of admin, who take first calls and things like that, are equally as important, because if you're the first point of contact, or what you're hearing, it depends if you take it to your head and to your heart, and the compassion you've got to take to both. So it's like double the amount on that. And I think it's not, some people want us to be a referee. So then we have a different sort of balance between splits and families at the same time. So it's still a very grey area and very hard, but I think coming back to like the mantra, if I was to ask you what your dad's mantra was, but you're the next generation, so what's Oliver's mantra to all of that?
To me, it would basically just be stop making excuses and make time.
Yeah.
It's so easy to make excuses for things. It really is. Just do it. Do it now. You're not going to do it.
Love
it's that simple.
Yeah. And off the back of that, like, I read about you. I'll get things, I promise. And I read and heard about your passion in helping drive the industry forward. And in a well-being sense, that was pointed out to me, and obviously through this conversation, that's just made me smile, because it's highlighting it even more, and obviously again the reason why we're here. So as an industry as a whole, as an individual, and as an individual company of Arthur C. Towner, the importance and the benefits of how we're progressing as an industry is well-being. How does that make you feel about your passion for going forward and the way that we move with the world in terms of the funeral industry?
Look, I think it's hugely important. So I'm still reeling slightly at the fact that I managed somehow to find my way onto the national executive recently, which is fantastic, because I think, after of conversations that I've had, I'm not necessarily one to hide my opinions away. And I thought for a time that maybe that is the kind of thing that wouldn't be particularly helpful to some in the industry, but it seems that the opinions I have actually aren't unheard of anymore. They're commonly held things, and for me, there are two big holes, gaping holes in not just in SAFE but in the industry in general. And one is our approach to the environment and sustainability, which is something I'm very keen on looking at, working on and improving. And the other one is well-being and mental health. I mean, it has astounded me for years now that, especially with funeral directors, and as you said, front of house team as well, like we are expecting those people to talk to families who are potentially going through the most difficult phone call or meeting or time in their life. And we're shown how to fill in paperwork. We're shown how to walk. We're shown what to wear. We're not shown or taught or even spoken to about how to look after ourselves, how to deal with someone going through grief. You said it yourself about people not taking things on, not taking it to heart, using your head, that kind of thing. There's no preparation for that. And when it comes to hiring funeral directors, for me, there is only one thing really that I look for, which is emotional intelligence. Everything else, the skills behind being a funeral director, you can learn. It is just skills. The emotional intelligence to know either what that family needs you to be, whether they're the kind of family that want you to have a laugh with them, or it's very somber and difficult for them to be going through. They need you to be sympathetic and understanding. But also, how do you look after yourself in that moment? How do you not take that on? How do you switch off, as you asked earlier, when you leave the office, that kind of thing? And I think that, for me, more than anything, was highlighted post-COVID, and it hasn't gone away. And I hope that's one of the benefits that comes out of COVID, is that this conversation happens more often on a bigger scale and is taken seriously. Because I think we were the forgotten industry during COVID, and
massively.
That weighs heavy on all of us. I know it does. And I think we need to support each other, and we need to start taking this sort of thing seriously and come up with a way to protect ourselves and each other to keep going, really.
Do you think that that's the only way that that's going to happen, is by looking after our own? We did a survey with SAFE not that long ago, and the message of stronger together. And I think it's having this conversation highlights it, that we need to be stronger together, because I think no matter what happens, we are going to have to create everything that we're doing right now ourselves in order to raise the awareness. I had a conversation recently, and it was talking about when we have things going on in the press, or we're guilty by association. So that guilt then takes these negative feelings towards us as an industry, because we are guilty of that association, and it's totally forgotten about everything else. So again, we are the forgotten industry. And I really hope that anyone listening back to the conversation that we're having really takes away from that. We are two people that suffer with mental health, and have had our struggles and go through struggles and challenges, and to do the job we do, we have to look after that. Without looking after that, we're not going to be who we need to be, and we're going to continue to be who we don't want to be. And that's really strong. So off the back of that, if you were to share any tips, any advice, or anything that anyone listening to this right now, or watching us, whatever they're doing, could take something away, or could just have something to think about off the back of this conversation that we're having, in terms of well-being, in terms of being the best that they can be in their role within the industry, and looking after themselves, any one of them or all of them?
Sure. Look, I think we're stronger together? Yes, absolutely. I think SAFE, as a society, is the age-old adage from Jungle Book of the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. We're strong as SAFE members because of SAFE, and SAFE is strong because of its members.
Yeah.
And if the membership, if anyone listening to this isn't engaging with SAFE, then please do, because SAFE needs to hear the voice of the membership now more than ever, with everything that's coming at us from regulation, from this, that, and the other, and these people telling us that we're terrible people and we need to be doing it this way and that way and this way. If people aren't engaging with this conversation and putting their opinions across, then you're just going to be told how you have to run your business. And that's why, for me, it now is the right time for me to step forward for the executive, because I want to make sure that those opinions are heard at such a pivotal time. And I think it is so important that people understand the kind of the sheer volume of change that has already happened in the last. We heard at the AGM about sort of the funeral industry's had more regulation in the last 5 years than in the last, hundreds of years combined. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it could be done badly. And that is why it is so important for as many people as possible to make sure their voices are heard, so that we're sort of taking all that forward and implementing changes that people want and hearing opinions rather than, whoever speaks loudest being the person that gets heard, because that's not how it should be.
Yeah, it's definitely changed. Certainly from my experience growing up, I'm sure you would share the same sort of feelings towards that. But I think, now that you're one of the new voices on such a big platform, and a big platform now that, more than ever, we have to create our own opportunities with it. And as you say, creating our own opportunities is by speaking up, voicing our opinions. Not everyone is going to like the opinions that we have, but if we keep quiet, we're never going to move forward. And that's where, self looking after, and, looking after our own and everything like that we talk about is one of the key benefits and the key aspects to the importance of all that. And I think it's been great to share in that conversation and, have some really in-depth insights to that. And anyone listening back to this, I really hope that they can take something from the conversation that we've had. And it's going to be key. So I can't thank you enough again for your time, for taking your time out and sharing everything that you have with me. I was looking forward to this, especially coming from your background and everything. It's just, we go full circle, but it's been really, really good. So I can't thank you enough. So we're going to sign off there. I think it was a good way to end it. So Oliver, thank you very much for your time today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.